Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a very important discussion that will focus on affordable housing in Rwanda, looking at challenges and solutions. As Rwanda space continues to gather in terms of urbanization, it's very important for us to look at how we can provide, as well as mitigate the gaps when it comes to providing housing, affordable housing from middle to low income households. Our discussions will focus on the status of affordable housing in Rwanda and looking at the gaps that exist and how we can mitigate these gaps. I'm very happy to welcome our three-person guest panel tonight, and I will start with the gentleman on our table on my right. I'm happy to welcome Mr. Leopold Uwimana, who is the head of the Department of Social and Affordable Housing from Rwanda Housing Authority. Mr. Uwimana, it's a pleasure to have you on the square.
Thank you so much.
Great. I'm also going to go over to our two other guests, and I would like to welcome them. We have with us all the way from Access to Finance Rwanda, the CEO of Access Finance Rwanda, and his name is Jean Bosco Iyachu. Mr. Iyachu, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Diana. It's a pleasure being here.
Great. We also have with us Engineer Emmanuel Ahabge, who is the Rwanda Housing Finance Project Coordinator from the Development Bank of Rwanda. Mr. Ahabge, great to have you on the show.
Pleasure, Diane. Thank you so much.
Great. My name is Dan Mpisi, host of The Square. As always, I'm joined by my resident panelists, and I'm happy to welcome Berna Namata on my right. Berna, it's always a pleasure to co-host these very important conversations with you.
Thank you, Diana.
Great. We're also usually joined by Charlie Haba, but Charles is not available tonight, but I'm sure he'll be following the show from wherever he is. So we're going to kick off the conversations. I would like the people on our social media, as always, to just send us their comments, their suggestions, their comments on our Twitter feed, Facebook, using hashtag #TheSquareRW. And the first question I would like to go to is to Mr. J.B. Iyachu, and this is to do, just to open up, to give us some context. This is a broad study that Access to Finance Rwanda did, and right now, numbers show that Rwanda needs 5.5 million housing units, up from 2.5 million housing units in 2019, to accommodate an estimated 22 million people by 2050. And these are figures from Rwanda Housing Authority. We know that real estate firms have been urged to provide low to middle income housing to meet this demand for dwelling units that is projected at 310,000 units per year by 2032. So these are huge numbers, and the gap is there. And my question is just the study that was, the report was just released earlier this month, I think on the 3rd or 4th of November. If you could give us an overview of the challenges faced in Rwanda, Mr. J.B. Iyachu, the challenges faced in providing affordable homes, to Rwandans, and the strategies that the Rwanda Housing Authority has adopted to mitigate the said challenges. Sorry, this question is meant to Mr. Leopold Uwimana. Yes.
Thank you so much for inviting us to this program and explain affordable housing program, how it looks like, and when and how it is started. So this program is based on urbanization policy of Rwanda. So Rwanda needs to be urbanized because currently we are having only 20% of people living in urban areas. And looking at the policies that we have and the national strategy for transformation, which goes up to 2024, was planning to have 35% of people living in urban areas. But it doesn't stop there. As you said, in 2050, there is another program looking at the National Land Use Master Plan, which generated many figures. It shows that 70% of people that will be living in Rwanda will be in urban areas. Mm-hmm. So that means 15.4 million people will be in urban. So those people will need where to live. They will need houses of different categories. But more than 70% of those households fall in affordable categories. They are for low and middle income. According to the study that was conducted in the city of Kigali, as you said earlier, it shows that 310,000 new houses will be needed between 2017 and 2032. So all these figures show that there is a huge investment opportunity in affordable housing program. So to address these issues of housing gap, the government of Rwanda introduced affordable housing program to facilitate low and middle income communities to access decent houses depending on their different income levels. So that's why I'm explaining why affordable housing program came in. Yeah.
Thank you. And if you could just give us, some of the tangible, if you could give us some tangible examples, what are some programs that RHA is involved in, either in line with, the Ministry of Infrastructure or with private developers when it comes to providing, affordable housing? Are there some projects you can mention on the show for the benefit of our viewers that are ongoing or even pipeline plans?
Yeah, when this program started, it started back in 2016, where we started with putting up some policies and strategies to guide the program. The first program that was put in place was to support the developers with the infrastructure subsidy. So after that, many investors came in and started benefiting to that incentive program. So we have around 850 houses which were completed in the city of Kigali. There are also 14 projects which are in implementation phase, which will yield around 9,000 in 4 years ahead.
9,000 units?
Yes.
Dwelling units?
Yes, exactly. So there are also some other 6 projects which are in the planning phase and may generate around 15,000 units. So that's where we are.
Okay.
That's where we are. It's in the beginning, and we are having many people, many investors who are coming to this program because it's very interesting.
Yeah. My last question for you before we go to, of course, our other people who are here, and I don't know, Leopold, if you'd be able to answer this. Maybe it's more for BRD and, access to finance Rwanda. But, some of the challenges some people have said when it comes to affordable housing, there's a mismatch between, research and the demand on the market. Those are some of the things, or the fact that there's a sort of concentration in investing in high-end housing, which we've seen at least in Kigali. So these are some of the challenges. How does Rwanda Housing Authority work to mitigate some of these challenges? Are you involved in sort of offering better, market research when it comes to the real estate sector? Are you involved in, that sort of thing? How do you, the institution, how does it work to mitigate some of these challenges?
This research that was conducted by AFR was to show the reality on the market. So we have, there are 2 key challenges. One is the high cost of construction materials.
Yes.
The other one is the low purchasing power of the target group. So to mitigate those 2 challenges is where the government has put different strategies where investors in affordable housing are encouraged to bring new technologies which can bring the cost of construction a bit down. And investors also encouraged to invest in local construction materials with the Made in Rwanda program. There are also some other assistance that are given to the investors in this Build to Recover program that was put in place after COVID-19 pandemic. So where large investors are helped to access exemption on construction materials. The government also provide infrastructure. All those are assistance to the investors so that the cost of construction can be lowered. To improve the low purchasing power of the people, you know, there are some programs which are concentrating on improving the capacity of the people. You know, in 2035, we'll be in a middle income country, so where people we have a very high purchasing power. So that's one of the programs which is in place to help in the housing sector. So we are also encouraging the developer to invest in the rental houses because, you know, people cannot, all the people, the city dwellers cannot afford to buy houses, but more people will need houses to rent. So those are key programs that we are putting in place to mitigate the challenges which are currently in place.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, these numbers, it's interesting when you read these numbers. You know, you see 310,000 units needed, you know, in Kigali out of 31,000 units. There's a shortage of 30,000 units. The numbers are quite alarming, and I think what we understand, and I think that's why we're having this conversation, is to show the extreme urgency of affordable housing. First of all, the rapid pace of urbanization in Rwanda, like everywhere else in the world, especially in Africa, but also not only the rapid pace of urbanization, but the need to also match that urbanization with affordable housing. The next question I would like to ask is to access to finance. Rwanda, Brian, I don't know if you have something to add, or I think let's just finish with all our guests before we have a discussion after the submissions. I mentioned this earlier on, sorry, the question was meant for Mr. Leopoldo Wimana. I had mistakenly said, addressed it to you, JB Iachu. But yeah, this question to you is the study that was done earlier this month in November. And it was called Scoping Rwanda's Affordable Housing Sector and its financing. So regarding the research now, you know, it's a big report. I tried to get through it after it was released, but it's quite dense. But you know, there's some key points that I'd like you to just state once again. If you could share with us the key points from this report, this scoping study that was done for a financial sector strategy for affordable housing that will meet the needs of different categories of Rwandan. So, you know, looking especially at low to middle income households. Just the key salient points of the report. Over to you, JB Iachu.
Yes, thank you very much for that very good question. I think already Leopold has already talked about the key barriers or key constraints that are there for affordable housing in Rwanda in general. But this study, probably I start with the reason why we went into this study. It was really to bring together the data and the evidence that is here and there, to put it in one report and portray that image in terms of the policy interventions that are there, but also looking at the demand side. I mean, the end users or those who are in need of housing units. It's clear that the housing supply that we see in the market is focusing on the high end, and there are so many people that are left out. So we picked different data sets and try to show the income kind of segmentation. When you look at people that households that earn close to 700,000 a month as an income for the household or less, all those, really, it's very hard for them to afford a house. And you wonder if we are to reach 5.5 million housing units by 2050, how do we reach that? So that's a big question. Now, talking to different developers in the market and looking at the supply side, you find that developers are focusing on high end, but also those that are constructing, they are constructing, I mean, you find different households putting up their houses and using their income slowly. They don't actually go to the to the developers that are out there with proper standards, well controlled, and that also brings some level of uncertainty in terms of urbanization and planning. So if I'm constructing based on my standards as an individual, how do you harmonize this at country level to ensure that the planning is well done and that is clear. So affordability is a big problem. But number two also, you find that there are small scale developers that are doing quite great work, but they are not getting financing from the financial sector. And that becomes an imperative for all of us as stakeholders to say, what do we do? How do we attract more capital? And when I say more capital, that should be long-term capital and capital that is actually affordable. So once the lenders in the market have affordable capital, then they can be able to lend to developers at affordable rates, and then they can also lend thereafter to the end users who buy and get mortgages for a long tenor. So that's a big problem, and but fortunately the government is already doing great things here. So many projects you can see. You can see IDP. These reports clearly showed that IDP is a good model, but the big question, can the government get more money actually to house all those people that need housing? Is there a possibility to actually to attract private sector into this model in a way that is profitable? So those are the big questions. So the report is available on our website. But as I conclude, I think the most important aspect is bringing evidence together as Access to Finance Rwanda is actually to catalyze investment from abroad into this market. As we discussed already, there are some investors that have picked this report and they are very interested in this market because they could estimate what would be the effective demand for housing in Rwanda, which is, that's the hope we have, that we shall all contribute to bring a solution to this very important question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iachu. I'll definitely be coming back to you also on the report, because I'm sure in the report there was some sort of salient solution-oriented recommendations that you gave that I would definitely like you to share on this platform for the benefit of our viewers, potential house buyers or potential developers for that matter. I'd like to go to the next speaker, and this is Engineer Emmanuel Ahabwe from the Rwanda Development Bank. And my question to you is with regards to the Rwanda Housing Finance Project, and you're here as the coordinator of this project. It's a Government for Rwanda project implemented by the Development Bank of Rwanda and financed by the World Bank to the tune of $150 million US. And Engineer Emmanuel Ahabwe, I'd like to just ask you if you could share with us at least 3 key examples. I know the project works on different pillars. If you could share with us 3 key examples of how this fund, or should I say facility, works to ensure or promote affordable housing through this fund, focusing on short, medium, and long-term market interventions, especially when it comes to the challenges of affordable housing in Rwanda. Over to you, Mr. Ahabwe.
Thank you so much, Diana. I would say that really as a project now, it comes into real implementation of the program. So it's part of the route, I would say, to implement the government's agenda, the program that we heard from Leopold. So one of the key interventions was to establish the fund. And this fund basically started as a way to now support the demand side, the off-takers. So where now, I would say in the short term, so when we talk about affordable housing or affordability, I'll look at it again in terms of having the units, the housing units themselves affordable, but again also supporting the buyers in terms of their means to buy and acquire a house. So when you look at it in those 2 aspects, and you start with the demand side, so if you capacitate the population and they have access to long-term financing, which is affordable, first of all, and affordable finance, this is something to do with if the funds are long-term, that releases a burden of somebody to pay at slow pace. And again, in terms of interest rate. So when you go to the market and the mortgage market and the interest rates are high, definitely you'll never afford to acquire maybe a decent house. So the project came in specifically to at least tackle that part. So in terms of short term, we are BRD is on lending these funds, the long-term funds, to the commercial banks, and agree on terms to lend to the beneficiaries, the targeted group, the low income, at an agreed interest rate, and again, for long term. This one at least releases a burden for somebody who is repaying their loan. So with that one again, continue to that in terms of medium term is, we see it, and long term, by the way, we see it as a rotating, a revolving fund, where now people who took the mortgages today, when they begin repaying, then another generation, they come in also still utilized on the same fund. And as we are here, this is, the government is also now starts paying back to the lenders. So basically, the whole idea is that for sustainability purpose of this fund, is if it is made a revolving fund, and we've seen most countries do that through creation of mortgage refinancing companies that can even go to the capital market, as my colleague was saying, and we raise funds, more funds for now people to be, continue accessing. If I come to the side of the supply, Leopold also mentioned about the infrastructure subsidy program that is embedded within the affordable housing to stimulate the supply. So a part of the fund of this envelope is actually used to do that. So the fund allows the developers who have these projects, so that now when they, for them to be able to deliver at an affordable cost, it's when you take off the cost of the infrastructure that goes within the estate. And the government has taken care of that. So through the fund, we are able to pay for those costs. And that is, we would say it is a subsidy, it's a grant that is given to people staying in such estates. And that is really a very good initiative that can even continue as government raises more funds, as government budgets for that, then it can sustain and cause living in well-planned and urbanization, as we mentioned. So I would say, again, another example that I would give is the real, I would say, involvement or supporting the different stakeholders in terms of establishing sustainable solutions or routaways that will keep running the program. I would give an example of so when developers come, they normally want to know, is there demand? Is there effective demand? So we are trying to put up systems and where we can link developers, financial institutions, and the buyers. So we're trying to do, and very soon we'll be launching a system where those can interact, and at least the developer comes to know that I'm building for so and so, who needs this type of house with this type of value, this amount of value. So with that one, you're really putting the three in one room, and everyone meets what they need. Again, working with the government definitely to support different initiatives. Like we know, when you talk about urbanization and high densification, we're talking about condominiums. So people now living in estates, in apartments, something like that. So if it all, as we tend there, there is a need to have all the tools, implementing tools, the allowing legal framework, and the project is supporting government to put all different tools in place. And we think it's a really good thing that will make this system sustainable, or the program sustainable. I think I would say that, and I can come back later.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the things that I mentioned before, and it reminds me also of similar conversations we've had with different institutions. I think you remember the conversation we had with RSSB. We've had this conversation on the square several times when it comes to just housing. There's always a sort of mismatch, and I said this earlier on in the show, between, you know, the market, like what do people really need, and what are people or developers, you know, putting out there in the market, you know, whether it's between affordable housing schemes, and the mismatch between people's socioeconomic status and purchasing power. And you just said, I just want to come back to you, Emmanuel, you said that this is something you're working to do, where you're working with developers or investors, trying to understand the market better and trying to align the sort of projects that will better fit the market needs. Is this something you think, this recurring problem, is this something that you think we are trying to get a hold of and understand better looking into the future when we're trying to build affordable housing schemes?
Yes, it is something that is really, I would say it's the key, that actually when there is that mismatch, then definitely you might find that the target or the aim can be missed. So if you look at the, as others use the term, the purchasing power or the capacity of the population that you are trying to accommodate, and what the developer comes with to supply, because of maybe different factors. I was saying, if they are not able to access affordable construction finance, they are not able to access all those provisions to bring down the cost, because we know that the incomes of the households might not maybe grow to that magnitude. But now coming to understand what capacity do they have to actually buy or own these units, then that one could be the basis to inform the developer to know what exact type of house you need to provide, and actually it is called affordable. So I really think that any initiative that comes in to bridge the mismatch between what the population, the demand can afford, and what the supplier can supply could be the focus for each and every party involved in this. So that's.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Barna. I remember the last time we've had some of these discussions, you've been very heated. But you know, Charles is not here. He's in the sector. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing that Charles is not with us tonight, actually. But yeah, I'm very happy to hear your thoughts on this, Barna.
Yeah, just for the record, I really wish Charles was here.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I will be speaking as a layperson, but Charles would speak as an expert
for sure
on this issue, because he's on the market. He knows what's happening on both sides. So Charles, for the record, I'm missing you so much tonight. Yeah, as they were sharing the plans, I was just thinking back and looking for what is new around affordable housing. It's good, first of all, that we have a study that now gives us the true picture, because then we know there's evidence, like he said, for investors to follow. But I wanted us to go back and actually define affordable. So if I could just very briefly, if you could define affordable as by the policy, what is affordable?
Can I just, before he does, I have it written here, so I would also like to just read it. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong as well, but just very quickly. So affordable housing, the housing science, and I think you people in this, and of course we're trying to make it as easily absorbable to our layperson viewers like us. The housing science defines an affordable house as housing units that are affordable by a certain section of society whose income is below the median household income. Can you comment on that? Do you work with this definition as well?
Affordable housing is different from country to country. It's different from the levels of income. In Rwanda, we define the affordable housing as a house that can be afforded by people in low and middle income categories. So that means people who earn, or households earning up to 700,000 per month. So people in the house, so they can contribute their income to up to 700,000 to afford a house which can cost around 35 million francs. So that's how we define affordable housing currently. And a house should not exceed 3 bedrooms. So it's between 1 and 3 bedrooms. So the floor area cannot also exceed 95 square meters. So that's how we define affordable housing currently in Rwanda.
So why that is important is, let us put perspective to this number, 700,000. How many Rwandans are earning net 700,000? Which takes us back to the question of purchasing power and incomes, how they go in hand. The reason I wanted us to really get deep into affordable in what it is, so far the discussion has focused on purchase, but even rent, we have a big issue. We don't have actually affordable housing for rent. So you want to look at affordability across rent, purchase, and also personal construction. So far, I hear the focus is so much on developers, which is fine. You want scale, yeah? But I think the policy should be able to give us the different options based on, of course, income. But if you cannot afford to purchase right now, the market should make rent affordable. As we speak in Kigali, I think we have a big issue around rent, affordability of rentals. The other issue I think also that we see is, and I would like BRD to comment on this, BRD working with commercial banks. In my view, I don't know why commercial banks would be the best partners for BRD on this project. And the reason is, we know that commercial banks, and for lack of a better word, are just sharks. You know, so if you want to achieve affordable housing for the lowest of, the bottom of the pyramid, I don't see how it works with commercial banks. We all know how commercial banks work. It's return, they're looking at returns. It must make business sense. Now, if we look at the reality of our incomes at the moment, it will take a very long time before the majority of ordinary Rwandans can actually live in decent housing if we continue with the commercial banks model. But again, I'm happy to be challenged on this. And I'll give you an example. BRD has mentioned that, I think they give it to commercial banks at 6%. On paper, with commercial banks, the arrangement is that commercial banks would give at around 11% maximum for it to be affordable. Let's go to the ground. On this market, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, if anybody is getting affordable housing at that rate, it is 16 and above. That is the reality on the market. So it would be good for BRD again to set the record straight on how they are working with these commercial banks, who is actually there to monitor and ensure that consumers are protected. Because once you leave it to the commercial banks, they're looking at the returns, whether you like it or not.
At the bottom line.
Yes, and my suggestion would be BRD perhaps needs to shoulder this, because the reason we have development banks is they're not non-profit 100%, but they're in the business of supporting government's, development agenda. So profit may not necessarily be a priority, as a development bank, as I understand it. Again, BRD can clarify that. So until we address some of these issues, I feel like it will be difficult for us to really have progress around affordable housing.
And meet the targets that we've set out for ourselves. I'd like to go over to BRD. Engineer Emmanuel, that's big questions from Berna. I don't know if you're ready to answer them, but yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much. Those are really good questions, and that actually need to be clarified, and so that everyone watching this can really understand how the process is. And the first one was whether the commercial banks are the right partners to work with first of all. So when you talk about this facility, as we called it, so and again, I want first of all agree with you on different options that could be there. But currently, with this facility and the way it was designed, we are talking about the ownership, and ownership through mortgage. So when it comes through mortgage, so you first of all know that BRD is not doing retail banking, like working with customers directly. So the only way now to extend this mortgage to the Rwandans is through their commercial banks, their personal banks. That's how it comes that commercial banks become the immediate stakeholder we need to extend the mortgages, because they're the ones with these customers. Secondly, actually, as part of awareness and for people actually to understand that this is a special product. So before this fund was established, everyone would go to the bank, and when you look at the terms for the mortgage, as you rightly said, you would hardly be able to get a mortgage that is below 16% of interest rate. But with this product, and we already have beneficiaries that have taken these mortgages at 11%, because it is a capped, and they don't have the option to increase it. We agree on those terms, we sign agreements, so we are the people doing the monitoring and the control, and we can clarify that, yes, they still have those products where they have different sources of funding, and they can sell such a product at their own interest rates. But when it comes to this fund, which is incentivized by the government, it would be a breach to really have allowing them to sell at whatever cost they want. But because they have different sources of financing, that's why they can still provide those options. But for this specific group of people not earning the household income not below above 700,000, they are obliged not to exceed 11%, and that's what is happening for that specific category.
Thank you, Emmanuel. There's so much feedback coming in on our social media feed that I just have to read it. I know we've been mentioning 700,000 francs, as the household for affordable. As some people on a Twitter feed, they find that incredulous. I don't know. So we're here to read all your tweets. As we're preparing our tweet lineup, I'd just like to quickly go to Mr. Access to Finance Rwanda CEO, Mr. JB Iyachu. If you could just share with us, just briefly, some of the key recommendations from this this scoping study that your institution did and released earlier this month, because I want the conversation to also, include recommendations, evidence-based recommendations on the affordable housing challenge in this country. So 2 or 3 key recommendations very quickly before we go to a Twitter feed.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, I just wanted to validate the concern of our panelists here on figures. When you look at people that households in urban areas that are earning below 50K, they are close to 8%. Those earning 50 to 100,000 Rwanda francs as a household is 24%. Between 200, 300, 14%, 100, 200, 27%. So it's a huge, really, percentage of people that are below 300,000. So the issue is, are we providing solutions that are addressing their needs? And most of them, when you talk to them, they're into rental. So they rent at a certain, so you find in urban cities, most of the people are renting either 1 room, 1 bedroom, or 2 in the backyard, and those they need really decent housing. So the study actually highlighted all that. Now the issue is, So that thriving rental market, why don't you design products that are addressing that? So there are, in other markets that are developed, you find rent-to-own kind of products in the market. You attract the right investors to come up with so many developments or units that actually someone can start renting 1 bedroom. When the income increases, then they move to 2 bedrooms, and at some point they can switch to even 3 bedrooms when the family has grown. So those particular investors are welcome in this market. I think there's a huge opportunity, and it's a matter of making sure that they have the right financing structure. So the key recommendations that came out of this study, being access to finance Rwanda, really we focus on financing. And we believe that finance can be a key enabler of this delivery. So first, as BRD is saying here, obviously we don't have long-term affordable capital. So even for those commercial banks, I want to be an advocate for them. Really, I mean, you look at the cost structure of their savings or deposits that they are using to lend. If they are to use that, they have been lending at above 16, 17%. And they have done their best because that's the cost structure they have. That's the kind of savings they have. Now, when BRD comes in with liquidity, that's interesting because it can push the cost low. And now, how do we work together as stakeholders to attract more long-term affordable capital in the market? And I think there's hope here because the capital market is kind of picking up here. Number two, you have Rwanda Finance, which is really coming to attract such kind of investors or funds to come and establish in Rwanda. So all those are initiatives that will bring that long-term capital. The other thing that I wanted to say is about we have industrial parks. And some of the times you wonder, all these people that are working in those industrial parks or in different offices, are the employers actually wondering about how these people live? Do they care? Do they actually think that they can come up with solutions? And I believe that there's an instrument called Real Estate Investment Trust, where actually you can build for your employees. It can be rent to own, it can be rental that is more affordable to majority that are working, the working class. So I think those are aspects that for the future should be looked at. And I believe, already, we must also be positive that already there's a momentum that has started. And that momentum, if it continues, we want also to investors access to finance Rwanda in this space. And I believe the trend will change. And we should be able to provide shelter to many.
Thank you, Mr. Yachu. I particularly like your optimism, Brenna. I hope your questions were answered from BRD perspective, from Access to Finance Rwanda as well, especially in terms of financing. I'd like us to just read some of the tweets that are coming in from our viewers. And if we could have that on our screen, the first tweet, if you could have that on our screen, is from James. And James says, thank you for the show. Urbanizing our country is a key solution to scarcity of land, mainly used for agriculture. My question is, what is affordability in terms of a household's income? As we go to our next tweet, I think we answered that question. I think you did a very good job, Mr. Uimana, answering the question on what is affordability in terms of the houses. The next tweet coming in is from Nikki. And Nikki says, this cannot be overstated. CFAR Housing is building affordable and middle-income families in Kabeza, Kichukiro. Capital remains a large hurdle in spite of some success borrowing from the U.S. So I think CFAR Housing is, I don't know, maybe international developer or not, but thanks for that tweet. We have another tweet coming in from Engineer Karangwa Frederick. He says, thank you, The Square. The big challenge in affordable housing is access to finance and expensive construction materials. I guess on point of access to finance, there should be additional source of funding, let's say from Rwanda Stock Exchange, not only relying on commercial banks. You know, the additional funding, I think AFR has said, you know, we have the facility from BRD and interested investors who are looking into this sector. Our other tweet, sorry, coming in, if you could also have this on our screens, is from Hakim, who says, we appreciate the efforts that have been put so that we have safe and affordable houses, but there's still a challenge of youth to have access to affordable, modern houses, as the purchasing power costs are high, purchasing power is low, hence no collateral security to work with banks. This is a very pertinent question from Hakim when it comes to youth, access of youth to affordable housing. Our other tweet coming in is from Sylvie Sanga, who says that if that is the definition of affordable house, actually the concept of affordable housing is a scam in our context. And she says, what? I think she's referring to 700,000. This is making the richer become richer, Gusa. Yes, Sylvie is very succinct with her words. And yeah, these are our tweets. We have another tweet coming in. Yeah, we have another tweet coming in, but I'd like to just, yes, just one last tweet from Engineer Karangwa. He says that expensive construction materials is also another challenge. I would like to ask you, Mr. Leopoldo Imana, whether in their policy they do support prefabricated materials at times that includes recyclable materials that are even environmentally friendly. So quick question, one is to you, Mr. Uwimana, and then the second, if you could answer it very quickly, BRD and maybe AFR, how are we dealing with youth in terms of focusing on youth and affordable housing? And I'll start with you, Mr. Uwimana, on the prefabricated material before we head to AFR and BRD.
Yeah, thank you so much. I said at the beginning that we appreciate and welcome new and good technology that can be increase the speed of construction and reducing the cost of construction as well. So any construction material like prefabricated materials are welcome, so they can be used anywhere in our construction industry, more specifically in affordable housing construction. So I think there are different plans that have been set here in Rwanda making prefab materials like prefabricated concrete elements. There are also lightweight steel which are being used in the construction. There are some good technology which are here not more than 3 years.
Okay.
So
thank you.
So we are embracing new construction technologies.
Thank you. Yes, and you had mentioned that at the beginning of the show. The next question that I'd like to answer is to do with, you know, just deliberate actions to involve youth or ensure that they also have access to affordable housing. And I'd like you to answer that question, Engineer Emmanuel Habwe.
Thank you so much. You also touched on the issue of the collateral with the commercial banks. So basically, when you look at the program and when you look at the target group, the low income, most of the youth find themselves in that category. And so actually, it's a good starting point for youth in terms of if there is an increased understanding, I would say, of what I would say the mortgage market, of if you're young and you can own something today, which you can keep upgrading, but I also know that you're being relieved in terms of what you pay back per month. So the good thing with a good mortgage with a long-term finance of a long tenure is that, first of all, that property you're purchasing, it's a collateral itself. So there is no additional requirement for another collateral. So when you have that as a collateral, you know, again, someone can again ask me questions around that, but at least you're not maybe required to first own another property to be a collateral for this one. So at least the project, this fund is clear that property you're purchasing is the collateral itself, and you can have, so the issue again comes around saving, which is the saving culture that we need to promote when it comes to how much do you also contribute to that property so that even the burden of the higher figure of the loan is from you. So basically, I would say in the essence of the project, actually, it is for the upcoming young households and the youth, and we know that they're the majority of the population.
Absolutely. Yes, Brenna?
Just to mention that, and again, BRD can clarify this.
You've really taken
it is a
them to
5-year
task,
program.
this week. Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it's a pilot. Yeah.
Yes.
It's 150 million.
Yes, US dollars. Yes.
That's clearly a drop in the ocean. So how do you leverage and get more resources for this? My personal request would be, can we have more transparency and campaigns around who they are working with, and so that ordinary Rwandans know, because usually these things happen and it's between boardrooms and the beneficiaries are left out, and then in the end when you approach the bank, you have no one to protect you, but if everybody's aware that you cannot go above 11% and you have 20 years and everybody's aware, then at least the consumer is protected. But when it's between boardrooms and the deal is signed and there's not so much awareness, it becomes a challenge, especially for the youth. And also to talk about the youth and not look at the structure of our labor market. It's also another whole debate, because I can tell you banks will insist they need, formal contracts, they need all sorts of things. Today, it's a gig economy. Most people don't actually have contracts, So there's a lot of rethinking that has to be done, but it's good that we have it. Let's see what comes out of the 5 years. My personal pledge is that I hope we have more transparency and disclosure around what is actually happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll take that as your closing submission. And I can't agree with you more. In fact, I would like to ask BRD, AFR, even RHA, after this show, if you can use our social media platform, use the Square especially, to just share more information on these affordable housing income schemes, as well as the fund, as well as the the $150 million US dollar funding that's being managed by the Development Bank of Rwanda. So please, a lot of awareness, like Brenna said, is very necessary. Closing remarks, very briefly. We have less than 5 minutes. Over to you, Mr. Ubimana.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say the affordable housing program is starting. So it started with the people earning up to 700,000, as they said. But as we keep moving, so there are some programs which the government is looking at to reduce the construction cost and attracting and approaching the lower people, the people on the lower level of the pyramid. So it's not the last step in affordable housing. So there are a lot of studies which are being conducted, and the government people, our leaders, are looking at different approaches to facilitate our population to access low-cost housing.
Thank you. Especially with the, I don't want to say alarming, but the very big numbers. We're talking about population explosion in urban dwelling, not so far into the future. So thank you very much for your submissions, interventions, and your comments on behalf of Rwanda Housing Authority. Much appreciated. I'd like to go to our other two guests very quickly, as brief as possible, closing remarks. And I'll start with you on behalf of Access to Finance Rwanda, Mr. J.B. Iyachu.
Yes, thank you, Diana, for this interesting conversation that we have just had. I would just say that the affordable housing sector is vital. Indeed, if you are to look at the Sustainable Development Goals, everyone deserves to have a shelter, and we can't afford to be a middle-income or upper-income country without actually everyone getting a shelter. So it's a priority for all of us, and I think coordinating all of us as stakeholders to work together to achieve that goal is very critical.
Thank you.
And we pledge our support, indeed.
Thank you. Very briefly, Engineer Emmanuel.
Thank you so much. In my closing remarks, I would really want to appreciate the point raised by Dana around the awareness. which is really, one, it's not only for the project, but for the increased uptake of such a products on the market. So we kindly really appreciate such opportunity for us to at least begin from here, and we hope that we'll be seeing more for the periods to come, and it's really in plan. So we really praise that, and we think that everyone should know that this product is there and it's accessible to all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to you. It's been a pleasure, very insightful conversations. I particularly, like I said before, also like your optimism from Mr. Yachu. Thank you very much to Engineer Emmanuel Ahabge, and once again to you, Mr. Leopold Umana. Brandon Amata, always a pleasure hosting and having the square with you. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee, thank you for supporting the square. Please keep the conversation going using hashtag the square RW. Thank you. Have a good night. See you again next week.